The Elias Salomonsson era is finally upon us, even if it only lasts for just one game.
Your Locked On Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you enjoy what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, we just love and appreciate your support, and you continue to help us reach the #1 status among all sports podcasts. Tonight's episode, we have some very interesting stuff happening around the Jets right now. We had practice earlier this morning, and I was waiting to report on this a little bit because Elias Salomonsson is in the lineup unexpectedly to some degree. He has joined the Jets, and he is in the practice rushes for the Caps game tomorrow. So very interesting, right? This is a completely new scenario for the Jets. We really don't ever see them put in rookie defenders. I think the last young defender that we really saw any shifts for was I guess Heinola, and Ville has spent most of his time either in the press box or the minors. Salomonsson, I think, is viewed a lot differently. So I want to chat about that. Want to chat about these strange lines. The Jets are doing some funky things ahead of this Caps game, and I'm not sure that I agree with all of it, but we'll chat about some of it. And also, the Brad Lambert rumors continue to swirl. Frank Saravalli keeps trying to make this Ducks thing happen. If you haven't heard about the Ducks thing, we'll chat about that. And what realistically the return even is, we'll discuss all of that on tonight's episode. But before we dive into the fun stuff, did want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So, Jets are officially playing Elias Salomonsson. He is practicing with Dylan Samberg, and if I was to think about a role for him starting out in the NHL, your first game, I suppose Samberg's probably the guy that I would say is the most likely candidate to get some shifts. I'm a little bit surprised to some degree that he's not on the third pairing. Salo, obviously is a player who I think is going to adapt relatively quickly to NHL life once he actually makes the dance full time. His progression since coming over from Skellefteå to North America really didn't take much time at all. His first season, he had a very impressive rookie season with the Moose, was racking up points and very clearly cemented himself not only as the top defender on the team, but also just one of the top attacking-oriented minded blue liners out there. He's a great two-way skater. He's offensively very ambitious, great vision, great distribution. He's got a pretty decent release. I wouldn't say goal scoring is his primary thing, but he does do that trailing skater thing pretty well. So Winnipeg, I think, has a lot of hope for him. And I think the fact that he's already being played with Samberg is an interesting choice. Salomonsson, long-term, I think, is viewed as DeMelo's successor. Listen, like Dylan, I love him, but I think it's very obvious the past year or two that age is starting to slowly creep in. Last year was definitely a down year by DeMelo standards. This year, he's had a much better start. He's looked more like the DeMelo we've known to come and love. But, he is in his early to mid-30s now. As you start to age out, your body can't react as quickly, and DeMelo's skating is definitely slowing down. I think he himself would probably admit that. He's a very smart guy and is always very upfront and honest about where he thinks things are. If you saw his quote the other day after the Jets lost to Minnesota, the guy was pretty pissed. And he's always been a vocal leader that way, and so I think he has a very good sense of things, and he probably knows that Salomonsson is going to eventually trade places with him here alongside Morrissey. Salo is such an interesting prospect for me because we really haven't had a defender of his caliber in our system in a long time. I think Heinola was probably the last skater on the back end that I thought really had the same level of potential. And of course, the Jets didn't really agree and ended up not utilizing him during his most formative years. And so, now he's probably at most like a second or third pairing guy. And really, we're talking more like a number 5 or number 6 defender, less so on the 3-4 spectrum. So, arguably more third pairing than anything. And I just, I think for him, it never really worked out. Salomonsson, I'm hoping that they kind of rewrite the script here a little bit. The Jets haven't graduated many prospects recently. It's becoming a bigger point of discussion now that the Jets offense hasn't exactly been lighting the lamp all that much. I've talked about it a lot over the years. I think a lot of people are waiting for outcomes when they should be looking at the process first. I think that's the most important thing. The team may have been winning a lot of games, but how they do it and what it means for the playoffs is always a really important discussion. The playoffs always have a little bit of an outsized impact on how everyone views what you've built. And so, going to be an interesting thing, right? Does Salomonsson eventually raise, part of this team's ceiling? I tend to think that, only attackers who score loads of points and drive a ton of offense really raise your ceiling. Salomonsson's had a very productive start to his AHL career, though. If he becomes like Morrissey light on the right side, that would be a tremendous outcome for the Jets and something that, Winnipeg's drafting group can very much take a lot of pride in. The scouts, I think, have identified a very good player. Salo is probably one of the few prospects this team very much views as untouchable. I think that they love this kid, and the fact that he's already with Sandberg to me tells me that there's a bit of a different thought process with him compared to maybe some of the other prospects. I'm sure Arniel's thrilled to have another mobile back-end guy. It is a little funky that, Miller didn't really get the same treatment. So interesting to see all of this sort of pan out. We'll have to wait and get a sense of how many shifts Salomonsson will actually play. My guess is once the third period hits, you'll see Miller and him swap. Or if he has early shift struggles, maybe you see him get sheltered immediately. Playing with Sandberg is going to require some pretty hefty reads from Elias. I think that this is a lot of responsibility to put on a young rookie in his debut NHL game. And so, it wouldn't shock me if we see Miller eat some of those shifts with Sandberg every now and then, and maybe Elias swaps to the third pairing. But all the same, very, very fun to see, some of these kids that we've been talking up for many years now finally getting a chance to make their mark. Amongst the forwards, we didn't really have too much success with some of the call-ups. The one guy that I thought did put on a couple of solid games is now asking for a trade. So Salomonsson is kind of one of our last players that I think we can really expect to be a potential needle mover in this pool in the immediate present. There's another player out there who I'm keeping a close eye on, but obviously with how the Jets tend to time their things, they're going to try and run out his waiver exemption before then. So, just a classic Winnipeg things. But in the interim, as Pionk is injured, he is day-to-day. Seems like it's not going to be serious. So I think the Salomonsson stint is really just going to be 1 or 2 games at most, and we will get to see maybe a glimpse of a near future, right? Next year, perhaps Salomonsson could get an NHL role. I think for a lot of reasons, this is very exciting. I'm hopeful that he really succeeds and turns a few heads as we start thinking about the upcoming next 2 to 3 years of Winnipeg Jets hockey. Give me your expectations for Salomonsson, though. What do you hope to see against or from him against the Caps in tomorrow's game? Drop your thoughts below or in the comments section. But of course, I do want to also talk about the Jets versus Caps and the Jets lines that they're going with. Some interesting things, some concerning things, and I want to chat about what Arniel is trying to do as he is looking for scoring from somewhere, everywhere, anywhere he can possibly find it. We'll chat about that in just a brief moment. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game and want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. And you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. If you're a stats nerd who loves following every single player out there in the league, this is your chance to take your basketball knowledge to the next level. If you can correctly predict who might score the most threes on a given night, who's going to have an MVP caliber performance for a single game, or maybe even for the whole season, turn your knowledge into big winnings with FanDuel. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Payouts are fast, safe, and secure. There's never been a better time to get started than right now, because FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Hey, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and now the #1 sports podcasting network available. Thanks for rejoining us as we are talking a little bit ahead of Winnipeg versus Washington tomorrow. Going to be an interesting road game. Not sure if I'm expecting a lot right now. The Caps have kind of been lighting up opponents left and right. And while the Jets 5v5 game, I think, has actually stabilized quite a bit and looks, frankly, pretty decent the last couple of games to even good, unfortunately, the finishing hasn't been enough to make up the difference, which is really unfortunate. I think this team has kind of been in a little bit of a rut lately. I'm sure the Jets would love to have some kind of a quality win here. I was hoping it would come against the Canes to get a little bit of confidence back. That's one of those things where if you beat a really good team like Carolina, one of the very clear out-and-out cup contenders, that can give you some confidence to build on, right? Obviously, it's not going to make up the difference in skill necessarily, but, that confidence can go a long way just to making you feel like you can keep pace with these top teams. The Jets are out of a playoff spot right now, and I'm sure that they don't like to be there. It's not a fun situation, and having to make up ground already in the season probably doesn't feel the best. Arniel has tried to do a lot of things, and I think his frustration is starting to boil over just a little bit. He has completely scrambled the bottom 9 lines. There are some familiar combinations here, so it's not like a complete reset, but looking at what they had in practice earlier this morning, you've got Connor Scheifele and Velarde. I spoke last episode why that line needs to be split. I still stand by it. I don't know how the best configuration would look. But at some point, that first line's just eating too many shifts together, and the Jets need offense from other lines. I mean, CSV was good enough to handle the first several games, but as soon as they go dry for any stretch, everyone else really struggles to keep pace and add in goal scoring support. So, CSV, hope that they have a big game against Washington. It's going to be probably a bit of a must. Where things get a little funky, though, is when you start going from the second line down. You've got Pearson, Nemesnikov, and Perfetti, and I like Vlad. I thought he was starting to really find his game as a wing this year. Moving him back to 2C, not really my preference. Look, Vlad does a lot of the details, plays well. He's a very strong defensively minded center. And I think for what the Jets have asked him to do, he's really punched above his weight in many seasons. But, here we are in the same situation as we were last year, looking for another 2C. And the Lowry 2C experiment lasted all of like 2 periods, maybe even less last game. I know why the Jets are afraid to commit to it, and they weren't really seeing the finishing returns that they wanted. But Lowry is probably your second best center behind Scheifele. I don't really think that there's another solution internally right now unless the Jets do something funky. But their third line, they've gone back to the usual well of Niederreiter, Lowry, and Iafallo. Fine. Like, those guys work pretty well together. I really can't have any complaints about that. It's a good third line. Is it what the Jets should be doing in light of them needing to maybe scramble these units and squeeze out more offense elsewhere? I think you can debate the merits of that a little bit more intensely. The fourth line, though, I think is where a lot of eyebrows are going to start being raised. You've got Barron, Taves, and Nyquist. And unfortunately, listen, JT, I think, has done about as much as he can, but he has played basically at the level of like a depth fourth line center. I think this move probably has needed to happen for a while. And, on the one hand, it's not really like he's played so much worse than expected. I think he's probably been about where I thought he might be. But you look at the forwards on this team and where Taves has been, both in offensive creation and sort of the defensive impacts. I think this is probably best for everyone if he starts getting some limited minutes. I don't think he's been able to keep up as efficiently as some of the other guys. And while Niederreiter, Taves, and Nyquist looked, pretty good in the last game together, um, I just think this might be a way to maybe give him a few extra shifts off and allow him to maybe save some of that energy to burst out a little bit later in games. With Barron, I am interested to see how he and Taves operate. Barron is such a force along the walls and will certainly crash the goal mouth. Taves actually drives the slot a fair bit too, although he does tend to, in my mind, really want to work behind the goal and below the goal line. So how those two kind of play off each other will be interesting. I really need to see more from Nyquist. I thought, in some ways he was finding his game the past couple weeks, prior to that injury. Recently, though, he's just not really doing a lot offensively, and I think that's kind of not ideal for like 3-ish million, a little over 3 mil. So, the Jets have a lot of guys that they're paying not insignificant money to, and so far, most of them really aren't finding the back of the score sheet or back of the goal and getting on the score sheet. And like, it is what it is, right? I don't think any of us is super shocked by this. But like, you look at this bottom 9 and it just speaks to the fact that Winnipeg is really afraid to change the one line that I think could have the most impact on this whole team. And they keep trying all of these other combinations to squeeze offense out. And unless you get some external help, I just don't know what you do, right? I think Winnipeg's kind of in a tight spot where, their options are limited. They've already sort of hamstrung themselves with a top line that generally does enough in most games. But, in the games where they start going dry, things get grim pretty quickly. And, I don't know where else they can find help from. They don't have a ton of elite high-end trade assets to put out there for a big player. They could try and find some guys who are disgruntled or maybe some teams looking to cut salary. The Vancouver Canucks have apparently suggested that they are open for business. They are kind of in selling mode, and that includes guys like Pettersson. Elias, of course, I know a lot of people have many mixed feelings on. I can tell you right now, if you're looking for a franchise-altering move and you're willing to pay up, Pettersson's probably the closest thing. He'd be a transformative presence for this team, and you can complain all you want to start. I promise you, in a few weeks of him being on this team, you'll start to see why, there's some urgency to really make something like that happen. He's one of the most creative players in Vancouver. It's just that his teammates can't really seem to make heads or tails of a lot of the good setup stuff that he does. So, you've got that. You've got Connor Garland out there who's, a real feisty top 6 wing, honestly fits the Jets in some ways culturally and maybe even play style wise. But I don't know if he's super up for moving. I don't know what his whole plans are. The Jets have, plenty of options out there that I think will start shaking out over the next few months. But, while they're still trying to salvage this and try and keep pace with a lot of the division leaders and stuff, they might have to really endure some lean times, and some guys are going to have to step up that I don't think, it's necessarily fair to be thinking of them as elite finishers. We're asking a lot of fourth line and middle 6 forecheckers to try and squeeze out more goals. I don't know if I see it. And poor Comrie has to be a little bit of the whipping boy here while, he's going to try and save as many goals as he can. It might not be enough if he surrenders 2 or 3 and the Jets score 1, what is he realistically going to do? So, going to be an interesting game here against the Caps. I'm fascinated to see where this goes. I'm curious to see if the line blender comes out. If the Jets really don't score again and continue to struggle for the rest of this week, we've got a rematch with the Canes on Friday. Do we finally see some pressure on the top line? For as good as they started the season out, they really need to be willing to take one for the team here and maybe play a different game. The Jets are not built to be this elite top-end team. They have a very top-heavy scenario with one scoring line, lots of forechecking lines, and, how you go from there is a big question right now that I think Winnipeg is desperately trying to answer before it becomes too late and this hole that they've dug themselves in becomes too deep. But, This is the price a little bit for doubling down on this core. This is in Chevy's court now for him to figure out how to take this team from being, a fringe contender right now or even a fringe playoff team into something a lot more fun to watch. But curious to know your thoughts on these lines. Do you like them? Do you even want to watch them? Or do you look at them and ask yourself, what on earth is Arnie cooking? Drop your thoughts and comments below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Closing out, I want to chat about the Brad Lambert deal. We're seeing fairly interesting rumors, stuff that I'm not really putting a lot of stock in, plus a couple of teams that keep getting linked to his name. We'll chat about whether these fits are real and what the Jets are even asking for in return, coming right up. Hockey season is officially here and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games. But let's be real, getting tickets can be a total headache. Between waiting in queues, surprise fees, and prices that jump right before checkout, it's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on your team. That's where Gametime comes in, the app that gives fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NHL tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. If you are like me, you are probably a big sports watcher and you appreciate the live games more than anything. I went to a Ravens playoff game and used Gametime to pick up a couple of tickets. Unfortunately, we lost to the Chiefs, but you know what? It was a great time, and Gametime made it so simple because I got to see a panoramic seat view. I had all of the prices up front, and Gametime even showed me one of the best value tickets in the whole stadium, where delivery was fast, easy, secure, and I got a great, high-end seat to where I could see the game perfectly. It was extremely affordable in my price range, and Gametime was super convenient. So take the guesswork out of buying NHL tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That's code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Hey, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us in tonight's closing thoughts as we are chatting a little bit about the Jets. And, this whole Brad Lambert thing is starting to become a little bit of a distraction in my mind. The Lambert trade rumors really seem to be coming from like Frank Saravalli and maybe one or two other people. Friedman, I think, has mentioned Lambert a little bit. And generally speaking, I think the sense is this, right? The Jets are going to be patient. They're not going to rush this trade. And apparently they're looking for a Lambert-like return, which, I can't say that really intrigues me. I don't really think you want to try and just trade for another prospect. But Lambert's value, I don't know if it's that high. So there may be some calculus here from the Jets to try and find somebody who can be a standout on the Moose and either translate that to NHL success or trade him again for something else. Either way, this is usually where the Jets do their best work. I just don't really know if the Lambeau return is going to be that impressive. I'm kind of feeling like the value here is not going to be great. And unless you package Lambert for something bigger as a real swing for a piece, I don't know that there's many other returns that are going to be impressive and stand out to people. So who really even fits the bill? Well, we've seen links to Calgary, to Vancouver. For some reason, Saravalli keeps trying to make this Anaheim thing happen with Mintyukov. Mintyukov has requested a trade if he doesn't get an increase in ice time. And based on their decor, I suspect he's probably one of the odd men out. So, yeah, it's a weird situation because Lambert, I don't think himself gets you much in return. But as part of a package, could you make a bigger play for another player? Well, maybe. It's got to be a good fit, though. And I just don't see many teams that can offer something that the Jets want. I keep seeing, Jets fans maybe talking about like a return of maybe Blake Coleman or a Connor Zary or something from Calgary. And, I could see stuff like that. Maybe you go to the Islanders. I don't really know, man. You need to find a team that's probably more looking for youth to start to rebuild and restock their system. But I think what the Jets are going to get in return, say from Vancouver or teams like that, is not going to be that appetizing. I just don't know that there's a lot of squads out there that are willing to give up that much for Brad when Brad's own track record recently hasn't been that impressive. Unfortunately, the Moose doing poorly and him kind of getting dragged down with him doesn't really give you a lot of evidence to build off of if you're trying to make a big swing. So I wonder how long, all of this is going to take. This might not be something that gets resolved during the season. I'm expecting that he probably is moved before the trade deadline. I suspect it's going to be sooner rather than later. But, the Jets are willing to be patient. And sometimes they've really played hardball with prospects and players and really waited things out until somebody gave them essentially the exact offer they were looking for. Will that be impressive? Will it be enough for the Jets? I don't know. But I'm not really anticipating that a big upgrade is coming out of this based on how the Jets are framing it and what we're hearing from the media. The Mintyukov thing, I don't really see any weight there unless there's a major package going the other way. Mintyukov is worth a lot more, and he'll probably fetch you some sort of a top 6 upgrade for the Ducks, so I'm not really thinking the Jets can offer that. I'm not really looking to trade Perfetti right now either. All of this to say that I think, Lambert, if it is a prospect for prospect swap, all I ask is that you please don't find, a prospect who's really, really underperforming and doing a bad job that just doesn't really look up to snuff, right? Try and find someone that's at least capable of being something for us to be slightly excited about. I think Winnipeg fans are feeling a little beaten down right now. I know that it's not that many points out of a playoff spot, but I think a lot of us have started to feel the pressure of, this team kind of being in this real tight window where they need help. And if it's not coming internally, the team is going to have to make some really hard decisions and make some big swings from outside to try and get the squad back into more competitive shape. I don't know if I feel like we're imminent on a big deal, but this season, there's a lot of moving parts. This year feels like a season that is slowly being forced into a transition year when I'm sure that's what, the last thing the Jets wanted to do. Here we are, riding on Comrie and Milic in goal, a Jets offense that is struggling to finish, one of your bigger prospects in the pool asking to be traded. It's not feeling like the happiest moment for Winnipeg fans, but as they always say, it's darkest before dawn, and hopefully after all of this drama and stuff, the Jets come through stronger. So let me know what you think we're going to get for Brad Lambert in trade. Let me know what you're looking for and what you hope the Jets acquire. Drop your thoughts below or at my social medias at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets on Twitter. For tonight's episode, though, that's going to be all the time that we have. Tomorrow we'll have a recap of Winnipeg versus Washington. Lord knows I don't know what to expect out of that game, so I am going to withhold any score predictions, but give me yours if you have them. And as always, we'll see you then. Have a great night, and go Jets go.